Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is RCB News, and I'm your host, Ryan Bowling. Continuing my discussion of last video in reference to slavery and the blame of slavery on the atrocities of Black America, I wanted to read a brief few paragraphs from another well-known African American economist by the name of Walter E. Williams. The name of the book is Race in Economics: How Much Can Be Blamed on Discrimination. Race and economics, how much can be blamed on discrimination. And Walter E. Williams passed several years ago, I believe, several years ago. He was in his 80s. And he was not as popular as Thomas Sowell, but he was up there. He was up there, and he knew his stuff, and he did his research. And he had his say when he needed it. When Thomas Sowell always seemed to get the edge, he would always put his little 2 cents in there. In fact, Thomas Sowell and Walter E. Williams associated with each other, and I believe they became friends. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Those of you who know Walter E. Williams and Thomas Sowell well, correct me on that if I'm wrong. But they did meet up and they did associate on occasions, and both were economists. Conservative economists. But before I read the paragraphs in this book, I wanted to say that Thomas Sowell actually started off as a Marxist, and he was a Marxist for some years before he converted over to conservatism. And in the interview, the interviewer asked him, "Why did you convert or change over to the conservative economic ideology?" And Thomas Sowell simply said, "Facts, history, experience." I'm paraphrasing his words, but he's basically saying that it wasn't someone that actually taught him that the conservative economic view of life is better, or the conservative economic plan is better or superior than the Marxist economic plan, but that he just saw through experience that the Marxist economic plan, based on the writings of the Communist manifestos, simply did not fit. They weren't accurate. They didn't work. Okay? So I wanted to read a couple of paragraphs from this book entitled Race and Economics. And I want to it has some very, very strong factual data in here that perhaps, if you're not aware of, you can take with you. And this is chapter 1, entitled Blacks and Yesterday. By the way, this book was written in, 2011, I believe. 2011, when this book was written. Jeez. Yes, 2011, this book was written. But just because the book is old don't mean that you shouldn't talk about it today. I'll talk about some, and as a matter of fact, a lot of the books that I'm going to be introducing to you guys to, if you don't have them already, many of these books are very old in terms of their publication. But all they are historical data. That's all they are, giving you history. History is all about age anyway. And the more you know about history, the better you'll be able to change the present and the future. Now, this is what Walter E. Williams says here. He says, "Some argue that today's weak Black family structure is a legacy of slavery." I talked about that in my last video, right? Blaming everything on slavery. Everything slavery caused it. But as long as you can keep blaming everything on slavery, you can indict America. You can make America look bad. As long as you say it's all about slavery and slavery, you can make America look bad. And also, on the political side, not only that, but 90% of Blacks vote Democrat. And the individuals that are saying that all the problems of Blacks are based on slavery, individuals who are saying this are the Democrats, and Blacks are like, okay, yeah, if that's what it is, then we're going to vote for you guys. Failing to realize that it was the Democrats that were the original sustainers of slavery. But that's another story, and I digress. I'm going to read this passage here. He says, "Some argue that today's weak Black family structure is a legacy of slavery. Such an explanation loses credibility when one examines evidence from the past. Even during slavery, where marriage was forbidden, most Black children lived in biological 2-parent families. So even though they couldn't marry, they were, for the most part, they lived among their parents. One study of 19th century slave families found that in as many as 3/4 of them, all of the children had the same mother and father. In New York City in 1925, 85% of kin-related black households were two-parent households. In fact, 5 and 6 children under the age of 6 lived with both parents. But once again, liberals constantly blaming these problems of illegitimacy in modern day black families on slavery. Really? This goes against the data, as Thomas Sowell always says, and Thomas Sowell said that just doesn't line up with the data. That doesn't line up with the data. It doesn't line up with the facts. He goes on to say a study of 1880 family structure in Philadelphia shows that 3/4 of all black families were nuclear, basically composed of 2 parents and children. What is significant given today's argument that slavery and discrimination decimated the black family is the fact that years ago, there were only slight differences in family structure between racial groups. The percentages of nuclear families were black, which was 75.2%, Irish, 82.2%, German, 84.2%, and Native white American, 73.1%. Only 1/4 of black families were headed by females. Female-headed families among Irish, German, and Native white Americans averaged 11%. Now listen to what else he says here. Also significant was the fact that in 1847, just 1 of 10 Philadelphia blacks had been born in slavery. However, those ex-slave families were more, he has this in italics, more likely than freeborn blacks to be 2-parent families. Theodore Hirschberg found that 90% of households in which the head purchased his freedom included 2 parents. Say that again. This man found that 90% of households in which the head purchased his freedom included 2 parents. He found that those households existed 80% of the time among ex-slaves in general and 77% of the time among freeborn blacks. Historian Herbert Gutman found, in analyzing data on families in Harlem between 1905 and 1925, that only 3% of all families, excuse me, this is gnat flying around here, that only 3% of all families, I got a clean house though, by the way, you know, things come through the window. Anyway, that only 3% of all families were headed by a woman under 30. Thomas Sowell reported that, and quote, going back 100 years, when blacks were just 1 generation out of slavery, we find that census data of that era showed that a slightly higher percentage of black adults had married than white adults. This fact remained true in every census from 1890 to 1940. So that's a long time for black families to be headed by a man. For black families to have the nuclear family intact. That's decades. So the question is, why is there such a high rate of illegitimacy among blacks today? And the argument is, and that's going to probably be on my next video, the argument is that when the welfare state came in, that was initiated by President Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s, it basically encouraged young ladies basically to get pregnant and the father could not be present. In fact, according to some factual data states that the welfare representatives would come to the house of that lady. She wanted to get on welfare. They would come to her house. Representatives would be sent to her house and they would check to see if there were any men in the house, because you could not have any man in the house in order to get these benefits. Now, some argue that the intentions of Lyndon Johnson and the welfare state was good. They had, the motives were good motives, they were good intentions. You know, they really was trying to help. In my personal opinion, I don't think so. And the reason why I don't think they were trying to help is because they're still doing the same thing today. You can't still keep doing the same thing, getting the same results, and then keep doing the same thing. In my personal opinion, it was designed to destroy the black family, in my personal opinion. But that's another story, and I digress. The point of all of this is simply to say this, that we can't blame everything that's going on in the black community in terms of the negative aspects of it on slavery. We have been given data from this book, and that's just part of the data. Okay, you read the rest of it, you'll blow your mind. It's a short book, small book, but it's filled with facts. We just can't keep blaming everything on slavery. I believe, as many others believe, that this came about in the 1960s onward because the illegitimacy rate arose at that time. So now, according to factual data, over 70% of children are born in the black community are born without a father in the home. Now, where did that come from? You can't say it came from slavery because according to the data that I just read, that wasn't true. Over 90% of them were married, according to the data that I just read. So where is this coming from? I believe, as well as many other conservatives believe, that it came from the welfare state that was initiated. It was also, by the way, that welfare state was known as the Great Society, that was initiated by Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s, that basically encouraged girls to have babies and not have the fathers in the home. The fathers couldn't be in a home. And all this, and you know where that leads. It leads to fatherless homes, needless to say, and a whole lot of other things, crime and poverty and all these other things. And it still hasn't changed in the black community. But it's time for black people to wake up and smell the coffee. So I just wanted to read that bit of information, Race and Economics, from Walter E. Williams, passed several years ago. But he was a great man and has a lot of good books. And I really was illuminated when I read this book. So, hey, on your own free time, if you don't have this book, hey, invest in it. You know, spend some time, invest in this book. It's another great book. If you guys like this video, press the like button. Make your comments. Let's engage in a conversation. Share this video and subscribe. Thank you very much, and see you next time on RCB News. God bless you.